evening, folks.
We have a wonderful evening's entertainment lined up for you, one that will provide several hours of pleasurable relaxation and diversion for you and your family. We hope you'll make this a weekly visit. Bring the family. Bring your friends. We hope you have a wonderful time. Come back soon.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Knights of the Pageless Library. We are a little podcast dedicated to reviewing audiobooks. I am Bo Knight, joined as always by my brother Ryan Knight, and today we are taking a look at Warbound, written by Larry Correia and performed by Bronson Pinchot.
Yeah, and Warbound is book 3 of the Grimnoir Chronicles, which we have covered both Hard Magic and Spellbound before in previous episodes. So if you guys want to go back and check those out before you listen to this, that would probably be good, because obviously there's a lot of stuff referenced.
Well, like massive spoilers too.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, actually, exactly. Yeah, definitely don't listen to like this and then be like, oh, wait a minute, I want to listen to book 1, and now I know what happens at the end of all 3.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've talked about this a few times though, about how we feel about the series as a whole. So we just decided that it would be good to go ahead and kind of round this one out. Even though we were just talking off mic that there are a couple of other books that we will talk about in a little while that also are part of this series that we don't necessarily count. So
We don't condone them. How about that?
sure, yeah, we sort of just pretend they don't exist as part of this series.
It's a real Dark Souls 2 situation.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, so if you guys have something to say about this series, this book, Larry Correia, if you have anything
Or
to say about
Bronson
it.
Pinchot.
Yeah, actually, yeah, absolutely. Please feel free to email us, kotpl.pod@gmail.com. You can reach out on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, whatever, all the other avenues. Just feel free to do so if you have anything to say to us. And with that, let's jump right into this one. So we probably don't need to say a whole lot about Larry Correia. If you've been listening to our show for any length of time, you will know we've covered plenty of stuff that he does.
Yeah, we
And-
have.
Yeah, and again, we've covered the previous 2 books in this series, so this series alongside the Monster Hunter series, though, and I have to say I haven't listened to a bunch of other series by Larry Correia, but I can probably say that these 2 series of his are my favorite series.
Yeah, I haven't really dabbled in his other stuff, so maybe some of his other stuff is really good. I just don't know, but I especially this time coming through Warbound, I think these 3 books are my favorite books of his.
Yeah, and for good reason, I would say. I mean, for sure. We'll talk about it a little later, but I still can't believe this hasn't been picked up for like a show or something like that, because
Especially these ones, because I feel like the setting is so rich and everything. I feel like it would go over so well.
just so easy to turn into a show. But I guess it's because it doesn't have the Marvel title on it. So.
Yeah, and I don't know how expensive like CGI and stuff is, because like a lot of the stuff would be really hard to pull off, I think.
I feel like hard is the wrong word. I feel like pull it off correctly would be difficult.
Yeah, but they'd have to make like dirigibles and stuff like that. I feel like that might be kind of hard to do. I don't know, maybe not.
Yeah, I personally think they could pull it off pretty well. Especially if you had somebody like a Guillermo del Toro directing or producing it, then I would feel most comfortable with it. But still, we're off on a side tangent here. Sorry about that. So what did you think? I mean, I know what the answer is, but tell the audience what you thought of Bronson Pinchot's performance in this.
Oh, I mean, he's the GOAT. He really is. And I think this book, all 3 of these books, but this book especially, he really gets to showcase his talents and the fact that he can just like globe-trot voices so easily. And I feel like all of his accents are so spot on and no characters sound alike at all.
Right, and it's done to perfection in that regard. And his characters are extremely consistent through all 3 books, which is crazy.
Yeah, I have to shout out like Heinrich. I think is done so well throughout all 3 books.
Yeah, see, for me it's
so good.
For me, it's Jake. I love Jake Sullivan's
I
voice.
like Mr. Jake Sullivan too. And I have a soft spot in my heart for Faye as well.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah. Just so well though. A top-notch performance as always, by Bronson Pinchot. If anybody's curious, we've actually had Bronson Pinchot on the show before, and we've gotten to speak to him, which was an incredible experience. And
yeah, he is such a nice guy.
Yeah, absolutely. The fact that he even agreed to come on and talk to us for an hour.
Yeah, this little know-nothing show.
Exactly. It was just incredible. What a great opportunity. So please do check that episode out. And if nothing else, at least get to hear how he is just as a person, versus as only a narrator.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so moving on. What do you say the genre of this book is?
So it's like noir, sci-fi, fantasy,
alternate
history.
Yeah. Fantasy for sure, because there's magic and things in that, obviously.
Yeah, but there's like aliens too, if you think about it.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, that's also a good point. Yeah, it's definitely a mixed bag of genres for sure.
But like a perfect melding, I think, of a lot of things.
Oh yeah.
I love the setting. The setting is so good.
That's kind of what I mean though when I would like to see this kind of come to life in a show or something like that, because again, it's all the formula is all there. All they got to do is make sure it translates from book to screen. The rest of it's all done for you. You don't have to pull some bullshit like they did with Rings of Power and try to come up with your own things. You wouldn't have to do any of that.
No.
I'm just saying this could be $1 billion much more well spent on something like this, where it's already so well laid out for you to do a series on. So this book clocks in right at 17 hours and 16 minutes. I believe it is the longest of the 3 books in the series.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
I think the first 2 are both like 16 hours. So Hard Magic.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, so I think both Hard Magic and Spellbound are both right around 16 hours.
Spellbound's almost 17.
Yeah, so this one clocks in just right about the longest. All 3 books, like that length, is very fitting for all 3. I feel like it's a very necessary length, and it doesn't overstay its welcome by any means either at that length.
No, and I feel like there's enough time to build to like an exciting conclusion too.
Sure. What you seen a price on this one, just out of curiosity?
How did we used to do that?
I don't know. I click over here onto Amazon or Audible, excuse me. Which is where we listen to this at, by the way. If anybody was curious, we listen to it through Audible.
Oh, regular price $29.95.
$29.95. Okay. So yeah, you could obviously get it for free, like when you sign up with the Audible trial or whatever.
And I believe these now you can only get these books on Audible from now on.
I see that. Yeah, I see that as well. That it says only from Audible. So that's an interesting little side tangent. It looks like most of Larry Correia's work is that way.
I kind of maybe they bought like the rights to Larry Correia audiobooks.
I don't know. It might be something to do with whoever publishes these.
Oh, you know what? You're probably right.
So yeah, because it actually says that it's published by Audible Inc. So that must be why it is a Audible only title.
I mean, that makes sense to me.
Yeah. Okay, so let's get into a couple big questions here before we move on to our recommendations on this one. Is this one easy to follow?
I mean, I think it is, but I've listened to it so many times at this point.
Right. And yeah, let's so yeah, take what we say with a grain of salt. for that reason. Just don't forget that we've listened to these multiple times. And I would tend to agree with you. So,
But I think if you'd listened to the other two books leading up to this one, you would be able to follow it really well. Just because the way it's voice acted, I feel like it's very clear who's speaking.
oh sure.
But I would see, like, because it shifts perspectives a lot.
That was
And
gonna
I
be
could
my
see that be a
comment,
little
yeah.
confusing.
Yeah, that was gonna be my one big comment too. Is that this, even though the other books shifted perspectives quite a bit, I feel like this one does it the most, and all the characters
it
are
does.
they're in such different locations each time it shifts perspectives. Is the only thing where it might get confusing. Like if you miss, you know, a couple lines or something because you're doing something else, you might come back and realize, well, wait a second, why are we halfway around the world now?
Well,
So-
and there are a couple times where there are like three characters doing something, and it shifts perspectives. Like, well, it'll be like one sentence about the other person, and then it shifts to somebody else.
Yeah, for sure.
Which I like that because it's kind of like all these events are happening at the same time. But
Yeah.
I could see why it would be a little bit confusing too.
Yeah, I think of the 3 books, this one could be the most confusing for sure.
There are just so
Um,
many characters too.
There's a lot of characters, and there's quite a bit like going on in this one leading up to the events. Whereas like the first one is relatively straightforward of like,
Yeah,
this is what we're trying to accomplish by the end. Although I feel like the first book had the best like twist to it out of all 3 books. As far as the those guys planting on
the
Imperial
Geotel?
ship. Yeah. As far as them planting the aiming, you know, the
Oh,
targeting
and-
device on there.
I know we're not talking about that book, but the way that Harkness's voice acted is so good.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Again. Yeah, just another, you know.
I agree with you. The first book is very like there's one main plot and we kind of follow it the whole time. The second book is like there's 2 plots really because you have like the main thing. Well, there's kind of 3 because you have like Heinrich in the OCI headquarters, the OCI guys, and like what everybody else is getting up to. And this
Yeah.
one is very similar of like 3 distinct parts again.
Yes, I agree. I would say, however, though, this is obviously, as you said, this is easy listening, though. This one, you could easily come back, like, even if you don't like the story, it wouldn't surprise me if someone was like, I just wanted to listen to that book again to hear Bronson Pinchot talk.
Yeah, dude, the dulcet tones of Bronson Pinchot always go
Yeah.
down smooth.
Exactly. So, again, this one, it's super easy to listen to in that regard, whether or not, obviously, as stated before, you need to start this series at the beginning. These are not standalone stories. This is a chronological story that you're following. So,
Mhm.
yeah, so with that, let's go ahead and get into our recommendations, if it wasn't already obvious for this one. So what do you think?
Yeah, I highly recommend the whole series.
Yeah. If it wasn't obvious, yeah, that's 2 like huge thumbs up from us for the entire series for sure. I would consider this like one of my favorite series of all times.
Yeah,
So-
it's up there for me too.
Yeah, and that's a combination of a lot of things. That's the setting, that's the characters, that's the voice acting. It's all of those things combined to just make the perfect storm for this book.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Yeah, and it just kind of caps off. I do like that it kind of puts a cap on everything, right? Like,
Yeah, it kind of closes the circle.
yeah, and that's so. Before we even get into our spoilers and stuff like that, we'll just kind of quickly talk about that. There are a couple stories that follow this one up, mainly Tokyo Raider, which Tokyo Raider is considered book 4 of this series, which I just don't agree with necessarily.
Yeah, it's kind of
Um,
crazy to me too.
Yeah, at least, I mean, it doesn't show, like, if you click on Tokyo Raider right now on Audible, it does not say book 4 of the Grimnoir Chronicles. It says a tale of the Grimnoir Chronicles. But at the end of Warbound, he says, now for a sneak peek of book 4 of the Grimnoir Chronicles, Tokyo Raider.
And that sneak peek is like 25% of the whole book.
Yeah, because the book's only an hour long. So, and then there's a couple of other ones. There's Murder on the Orient Elite, which is also only an hour long. And then there's also Detroit Christmas, which is also only an hour long. All spin-off stories from this universe, from this Grimnoir universe. But I don't consider them part of the main series by any means. Nor do I consider them necessary listen to the main 3 books.
And avoid Detroit Christmas at all costs.
Dang, maybe we should have done that one for Christmas.
No.
Well, there you go. Spoiler alert if we ever do that one on Bo's opinion.
Yeah. Dude, if you listen to that and like it, I will genuinely lose respect for you. I'm not kidding.
All right. What do you think? You want to go ahead and we'll pass spoiler wall and talk about this book a little bit? Okay, so for anybody who's new here, we're going to go ahead and pass the spoiler wall, which means we're just going to talk about the whole story as we can kind of recall it. So if you don't want it spoiled for you and you think it's something you might be interested in, please pause the podcast, go get this book, listen to this book, listen to the whole series, then come back and hear what we have to say in all 3 of our episodes on each book individually. We would appreciate that. So yeah, with that, let's talk about Warbound.
I love the way that this opens on like us reliving Baron Okubo Tokugawa's memories of him the last time he fought the Pathfinder.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
I feel like it's really good to show us like the stakes of everything and just how powerful like Okubo was.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, because he's talking about like switching powers mid-fight, destroying these enemies that the Pathfinder had set forth towards them. Yeah.
And I know he's a piece of shit, but I feel like you also kind of understand like why he's making the Imperium the way that they are. It's because he's like truly afraid.
It's one of those instances though, and I honestly feel like it's pretty good writing in this book. That yes, like in the first 2 books especially, well, not so much in the second because Okubo is not like a huge part of the second book, but for sure
but he
in the
does
first
give
book,
him a call.
Yes, in the first book they're doing nothing but painting with broad strokes that this guy is a freaking communist piece of shit. Basically, it's sort of the way that like United States felt towards Russia during like the Cold War, and just with broad strokes making you feel like, Okubo Tokugawa is the biggest piece. He's like Hitler of the Imperium.
Yeah, almost worse though.
Yeah, almost worse. Kanye West would still love him, but
him and Kanye West would get along.
Yeah, but in this one, it really does make you go, well, wait a second. He's legitimately trying to save humanity, though.
Yeah.
So, wait a minute. Is he really that bad? Like, as everybody makes him sound like he is? Because he did save humanity, what, twice? And and nobody but the Imperium is grateful for it, basically.
Well, but I mean, I guess we can get into it a little bit later about, especially because this book goes into a lot more about like Toru and like what he had to do in the Imperium, or like how depraved they kind of were.
Yeah, and I think that's where a lot of it comes from, is like that's kind of what you're getting this why he's kind of a piece of shit, dictator, ruler essentially, is because like his men, even though they're super extremely disciplined, they treat them like shit. It's a real like ninja assassin type situation. Like they're making these crazy strong and unbeatable warriors, but at what cost?
Well, I was kind of thinking about this time listening to it, and I feel like the power was kind of guiding Jake and Faye to meet the chairman and Mahdi.
Okay, sure.
Just because I feel like it was a different, they have like a different way of attaching to the power compared to the chairman.
Sure.
And I think the power wanted to know who was the strongest.
Yeah. And it honestly, like, it could have been Maddie easily. Like,
it could have been.
Because if you think about it, and that's one thing I love so much about the first book, is like Maddie actually whips Jake's ass.
Yeah,
like,
he has to get healed by Jane, like, what, twice?
Yeah, and that's just because Maddie tells her to heal him.
Yeah.
Because he's technically done. He's down and out. And realistically, Jake wins by being clever. Definitely not by being stronger. So.
But I think cleverness is part of strength, though.
Sure.
Just like craftiness, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I could talk about Maddie forever just because he's like one of my favorite like super villains. Yeah, dude.
Yeah.
And he would be another one who I'd love to see like on screen. Just, I don't know. I just picture like this Dolph Lundgren looking motherfucker, just all scarred up and just horrible. Like,
he's badass.
But again, yeah, like a super badass villain though. So, and then what do we move right into? Is it when Jake is going to meet with Dr. Wells in
he goes back to Rockville.
Yeah, Jake goes back to Rockville, which was the prison that he was put in, and it's the prison for like very dangerous actives essentially.
Mm-hmm.
And Jake, I like how Jake describes a lot of the things that are in place in Rockville to prevent specific types of actives from escaping. You know, the walls are super thick so that most fades could never get through them. Most of the things can't be made with like metal because of certain types of powers and things like that. It's just I like the way he describes it all going in. I feel like Dr. Wells in this book is the most disappointing character to me, to be honest.
How so?
Because to me, I just felt like he got a ton of build-up from the beginning of this. Obviously, like Jake sought him out because he's supposed to be this. Not only is he like a genius doctor and like psychologist type of doctor in a way, but he's also an extremely powerful, active, massive, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Jake wants him, kind of like you said, he wants him for both. He wants him for his brains and his brawn. And I just don't feel like he ever gets used enough later on.
He only gets like one. I feel like one like pivotable move that like if they wouldn't have had him, they wouldn't have known to do that.
Right.
I feel like, but that's the only thing he does. You're right. He doesn't get a lot of speaking time either.
No, and that was the only reason I say disappointing is because of how much buildup you get from him right here in the beginning of the book.
Yeah, it's like, this is the baddest motherfucker ever.
Yeah, it's like, oh shit, this guy's gonna do some crazy stuff.
Yeah,
and
we
he
don't
just
hear
never
about
really
him.
does.
Yeah. Well, we can get to it because I didn't pick up on the stuff at the end that kind of comes up about Wells, which is funny.
Oh yeah, okay, we'll talk about it when we get towards the end. So Jake recruits Wells to join them basically by explaining, right, what's legitimately going on, right? Because the rest of the world is kind of trying, like, either they don't know or they're trying to hide the fact that the Pathfinder is real and is a thing. Most of that is because, as we saw in Book 2, after they killed Tokugawa in Book 1, he mysteriously came back in Book 2. And the Grimnoir are like, this is crazy. We had to have killed this man. There's no possible way
Jake
to survive.
talks to his ghost.
Right. And Jake knows that it's an imposter. It's not really him who is, running the Imperium at this point. So now Jake is trying to basically put together a crack team because they have to fight the Pathfinder basically themselves, because if they don't do something about it, nothing will get done.
Well, and I can't remember if they explain it yet, but like basically their whole mission is just to wake the Imperium up. To kind of show them like, the Pathfinder is coming.
Right, and they need to get the Imperium on their side because
they're the best equipped for this shit.
Exactly, yeah, and that's what Tokugawa was training them for, essentially, was to be able to fight the Pathfinder whenever it showed up again.
Yeah, I mean, that's truly their purpose.
Right. So Wells agrees to go along with Jake. And I like Wells' character. That's why I'm still very disappointed about it, because he's really weird. but
he's super weird.
He's kind of funny.
Serial killer energy.
Yeah, for sure. And then what? We jump over to Faye. Is that right?
Yeah, we jump over to Faye, and she is watching Whisper's funeral, and she's like up on top of the church. And as she's up there like watching them, some guy climbs up the side of the church tower, and I love that Faye just teleports behind him and pushes him off and then holds on to him.
Yeah.
But we quickly find out that's Jock, who was like Whisper's adopted dad, and Faye thinks he can teach her about how to be like a good spellbound and not just like go murder crazy.
Right. Yeah. So Jack agrees that he will help Faye kind of try to hone in her powers, right, as best he can.
Yeah.
Jacques is also a Grimnoir elder.
Well, yeah.
He, realistically though, at this part, right, he was sneaking up on her to potentially kill her, wasn't he?
Well, yeah, he didn't know who she was.
Okay, that's right. And I can't remember, it's not at this part, right, where he talks about where she needs to go to find some answers? Right?
No, I think next we cut over to Francis. I don't think they do much yet with them.
And Francis is with.
He's testifying to Congress.
That's right.
Which is kind of a funny scene where he has like a peanut gallery. Oh, sorry. He has like a peanut gallery of people who are there with him, and they're like cheering him on as he's like making points and like table pounding and basically just making like a fuss about laws and stuff. And he's with Dan Garrett and what's her name?
Wait, whose name?
Oh, I guess she's not there. Jane.
Is Jane not with him?
I
don't think Jane's with them yet.
When they're testifying.
Right. And is this, correct me if I'm wrong, is this part of, he's also testifying, right, against because they're trying to make like active cities, right? Is that what he's like also trying to talk against?
Yeah, that and like that actives have to wear armbands to declare what they are at all times.
Yeah. So there was a shift in like towards the end of the second book where there's been this idea to start basically rounding up actives and giving them places to live. Not necessarily giving them, assigning them places.
Yeah, like it's not voluntary.
No, this is like concentration camps for actives. Like they are going to find you, they're going to figure out where you are, and they're going to make you move into one of these houses. But they're going to paint it for you like it's a good thing. Like, oh, well, it's free and, you know, it's not a big deal. You just have to identify that you are an active and what type of active you are. Like you said, they need to wear armbands for the rest of the general populace to see. And so this is what kind of Francis is fighting against, right? Is them allowing this to happen.
Yeah. So yeah, he's testifying with Dan Garrett, who I love Dan, the radio man.
Yeah.
He's so good.
I like his voice too. I love the way Bronson does his voice.
I will say one thing I find disappointing in this book is like the Francis, Dan, and Jane. There is not very much of them in this.
No, not
like
nearly
very
enough.
little.
Honestly, same with Heinrich. There's not enough Heinrich in this.
He gets like one sweet scene when they sneak into that snow base, and that's really it.
But that's really it, though. I feel like there was just a big shift, which I don't disagree with making Toru a very main character.
I love Toru. Don't be talking shit about Toru.
But I mean, like, essentially, you got Toru, you have Sullivan, and you have Faye are the main three characters of this book for sure.
Yeah. And Buckminster Fuller. I feel like Buckminster Fuller's in this a lot too.
Yeah, and Fuller's like, I don't know, like I like Fuller as a character, but he's not really like a main character.
No, but I feel like he comes up a lot.
Yeah. So let's see. After Francis, what comes next? What do they do next?
The president like calls him and talks to him,
calls,
to Francis.
Francis, that's right. Oh yeah, to come in and talk with him, right?
Yeah, and it's FDR.
Yeah.
And yeah, he talks to him, and he's like, hey, I would like you on my side. You're such a powerful individual. If you could just be on my side with all this stuff. And Francis is like, fuck you, I'm not gonna do that. And
yeah. Doesn't he try to
like,
pull some? He tries to pull some bullshit, right? FDR's like, well, your father would have,
yeah, he does
helped me out. Like tries to basically pull some bullshit on him.
And he basically tells him that he's gonna make life a living hell for Francis, and UBF is not gonna be making as much money because I'm gonna be cracking down on them specifically.
Right. Yeah, basically tries to blackmail him into, kind of going along and helping him convince all the other actives to go along with this plan that they've come up with.
And I would like to mention we get to meet Mr. Drew for a second, who's like the architect of all these like active towns.
Right. Yep.
And I feel like that's important to mention that.
Yeah.
I think the next bit is, don't we go back to the Traveler, and Jake kind of gives everybody a briefing about like what they're facing, and we get some kind of cool, them talking about all the science behind the Traveler and how it's like the fastest airship ever, and it can go higher than any other airship, and it has turbo, like jet turbines on it.
Right. I do find it very strange that the one thing I find kind of strange in this is that they use hydrogen gas instead of like helium in there. I feel like they tell you why in an earlier book, but
because they actually explain it in this one too, because that's how the Imperium does it. It has more lift, and cracklers can power machines to make more of it.
Ah, okay, that makes sense.
So like through electrolysis they can get it out of water.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, because realistically though, hydrogen is obviously so dangerous compared to
but that's
helium.
what Lady Origami's for.
I know. It's just there's a reason the Hindenburg thing was a real thing, and basically, and essentially why we don't use blimps and things very often, because
why? I think blimps are cool.
So do I, and I think it could be a much different world if we did use stuff like that. Maybe even, I don't know, much more environmentally friendly if we use things like that instead of the shit that we use now. But anyway, yeah, that's right, Jake. Because Jake basically tells everybody on board, right, exactly like what is going down, right, as far as the Pathfinder, right?
Yeah, and then he brings up Toru because Toru has Saito's mind in him, right? So he knows about basically all the old Pathfinder stuff. So he's like going to be teaching lessons to everybody. Right.
But none of the crew likes.
No, everybody hates Toru.
Yeah, everybody, and they're terrified of him.
Yeah, because he's scary. He's like a 7 foot tall, freaking just like, I imagine just a brick shithouse when I imagine Toru.
Oh yeah, for sure. He has to just be yoked. Let's see. I'm trying to remember too. When does Toru though contact the Imperium?
Oh, that happens when they go to the Siberian base.
Oh, that's right. Okay. So, oh yeah. So there's some shit though that goes down, right, with the secret police, right? That goes down before they go to the base, right?
Secret police.
Yeah. So when they go to Shanghai, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, that's not for a while yet.
Oh, okay. Am I getting ahead of myself?
A little bit, yes.
Okay.
That's okay. So, I mean, like, the next main bit is Jake purposely tells the crew they're going somewhere, like, I can't remember where, but he tells them, like, the incorrect place because they think they have a spy, and Lance figures it out.
Yeah, and Lance figures out who is the spy, who immediately went to go tell the Imperium, right, where they're going.
Mm-hmm. And Heinrich fucking kills him by just, like, fading him through the bottom of the ship and just dropping him on the ocean.
Oh, yeah, it's freaking rough.
But what they're really going is they're going to Siberia because the chairman had already created something that can essentially detect the enemy if it's already existing in the world. Because the enemy, like, it siphons magic away, So if there are spots with no magic, that's where the enemy's at.
Right, and it needs to do that, right? Because that's how it would get powerful enough to send a message back to the actual enemy to let it know where the power is at, right?
I think it's more of it's like anchoring itself to this reality so it can come through.
Oh, and there needs to be enough magic
Yeah.
used, though, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. Because it's basically what we find out later on is like when the Pathfinder's minion, or when the power, Jesus Christ, the enemy, sorry, all these very basic things, no names.
Yeah.
When the enemy, when the Pathfinders, which are the enemies, you know, minions essentially.
They're the scouts.
Yeah, and when they kill someone who's a magic user, they absorb their magic essentially. So the idea being that they take over a large, you know, area of actives. So there's multiple things kind of coming to fruition here that are worrying the Grimoire. Obviously, if they start rounding up magicals and putting them in these neighborhoods all together, it would make something like that much more easy to happen.
Yeah, exactly.
So now they really need to like figure out how to stop this thing, essentially. Yeah, and that's right. I remember because Jake, they interrogate that guy like in the middle of the night and kill him, and then the next morning, I like that Barnes comes down and he's like, "Why did we turn the ship?" And he doesn't even have to like look at anything. He just knows. He's like, "Why did we turn the ship in the middle of the night? Don't you think I should be informed of something like that since I'm the one who drives it?"
I would love a spin-off series just about Barnes.
Yeah, I like Barnes too. Barnes is a
his
solid
power
character.
is so interesting to me that he just is like lucky.
Yeah, he
That's like all he
manipulates like
does?
the odds. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
man.
like, it's such a cool power to me.
He'd be a great DM. Like he could screw you over so hard.
Yeah. Roll with advantage. Oh, that's 2 natural ones.
Yeah, well, that sucks for you. Yeah, so then do they go? I can't remember now. Do we cut?
I think we cut back to
Don't we
Faye.
cut back to Faye? Yeah, because
And this is the part you were talking about where she
Jacques.
sits down with Jacques and he's like testing her brain, and he just starts giving her mazes, and she's like able to solve them like incredibly fast. And then he gives her like the most complicated one he has, and she solves it in like 5 seconds.
Yeah, and I like that he hands it to her, and it literally looks almost like a black piece of paper because
Yeah.
there's so many lines. And he goes, "What about this one?" And she looks at it and she goes, "I can't."
Yeah.
And he goes, "You can't figure it out?" And she goes, "No, you can't get to the end. There are no openings." And he was like, "How did you know that? You just looked at the page." So, yeah, we find out later on why she's able to do things like this. And I
Which
really
is so cool.
Yeah, I was
actually.
gonna say I kind of like that little bit of a twist though.
Well, I want to talk about it, but that I believe that's where her head map comes from, right?
Yes, I think so too. I think
Yeah.
that's the only reason she has that as developed
Yeah.
as she does.
And because other travelers don't have that,
Right.
and that's why she's so freaking deadly.
Yeah. And it's one of the reasons why, and we'll talk about it in a little while, is that she can travel where she can't see. Even most travelers who are considered masters at it only travel to something they can directly see in their line of sight. They might be able to do it extremely fast, like in the first one when she's fighting the ninjas, whatever, on the Tempest.
I think her name's Toshiko.
Yeah, and obviously she was really good too, but obviously not as good as Faye for that reason that she has the head map. Correct me if I'm wrong, we have, speaking of the ninjas, have we gotten a couple glimpses at, I cannot think of his name.
Hayate?
Yes, thank you, Hayate. We've gotten a couple
he doesn't
bits
come
of
up
him yet?
until we go to Shanghai.
Okay, that's right.
But he is super cool too.
Yeah.
But I believe we go back to the Traveler, and this is when they're assaulting this Siberian base. And I love this scene of like it's like so cold, but they like go to the base and it's like derelict because it's so cold, like nobody would even be out there. Nobody's supposed to know about this base even existing, so the guys are just like really sloppy and shitty.
Yeah, and it's not really a good thing to be assigned there either.
Yeah, it's like a punishment.
Yeah, because basically all these guys are doing is sitting around and keeping the lights on.
Yeah.
In order for this device, they're supposed to just be watching this device and report if anything happens.
Yeah, so we get a pretty cool scene with Heinrich where he like sneaks in and kills a bunch of guys on his own, and it goes really in depth, like the only time of like how his power, how like being a Fade works.
Yeah.
Which I think is really cool.
Yeah, I like that too. I do have to say though, my favorite part of this whole scene is when they are sneaking up to the outside of the place, and Toru walks up and he's like, "I am cold."
It's just like I am cold.
It's just so, I don't know. I feel like that's like a great like joke for him. Perfectly deadpan.
It's pretty good.
So when they actually get in to this compound, essentially, Toru is pissed because of the way it's being ran, and
this is a facility that he had personally inspected.
Yeah, so he's annoyed to see kind of how not well kept the place is. I also like the little bit about how when they go from outside to inside, it's only like 45 degrees inside, but it feels like sweltering heat compared to how cold it was outside. Yeah. So when they get in there, right, Toru kind of sneaks off on his own, right?
Yeah, he goes and gets like the special mirror to call like the Edo court.
Yeah.
Like to basically call the chairman directly.
Yeah, which this facility is supposed to have a direct line to him because it's so important, right?
Mm-hmm.
So he gets a hold of the Imperium and essentially says that he needs to talk to Okubo Tokugawa, and they're like, "Oh my god, it's the freaking traitor." Like that's what they all call Toru, is a traitor, even though technically he's one of the few who hasn't actually abandoned their true cause.
Yeah, he hasn't. He's the only one that's actually acting like with Dark Ocean's true intentions.
Yeah, exactly. And he ends up talking to the chairman, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this is when he figures out that it is not Okubo, that it is, because he asks him a question, right, from
that's actually
Saito's
in the
memory?
second book.
Is that what it was?
Yeah, where he asks him about the poem. And then he's like, "Oh yeah, if you're explaining your poem to me, you no way you could be Okubo Tokugawa."
Oh, okay. Yeah. That's right. Because I can't remember now if Toru knows, or is this when he's trying to expose him? Basically.
I think he's just talking shit. Honestly.
He figures it out. Is it this point when he figures out though who is?
Yeah,
portraying?
it is, because he gives him like a leer, like a face that the chairman never would have made.
Yeah, and he figures out it's I'm gonna draw a blank on this guy's name too, but it was a guy who was part of Dark
Dosan
Ocean.
Saito?
Yes, it's Saito. Yeah, I feel like we used Saito's name earlier, but that's not who gave him the memories.
No, the guy that gave him his memories is Hattori.
Yes, yeah. Saito is this guy's name.
The fake chairman, yeah.
Yeah. So Toru figures out that that's who it is. But at the same time, basically, Saito is like, doesn't really matter, and there's no way you guys can stop us. Or he says some very cryptic thing.
He does, yeah.
Where Toru's like, wait a second, what? And then he like throws something through the mirror, right?
He tells him, I believe, that the Pathfinder is already here.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then he does. He sends something through the mirror.
Yeah, and so we don't get really a fight scene, but Toru comes out and Toru's jacked. Like,
yeah, and while Toru was doing that, the rest of the Grimnoir were like working on this detect locator thing, and Shura was helping them fix it. And once they fixed it, they realized there was a ton of spots, like all over these Imperium schools, that the magic is being drawn somewhere else already.
Yeah, it's so basically the Pathfinder is already there, like Toru was just informed of too.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and then Toru comes in and he's just jacked up, like his side is cut wide open, and I'm pretty sure Sullivan even says I'm pretty sure his guts were like in his hand.
Yeah.
But because of obviously all his healing kanji and stuff, he's able to survive. And then they end up fighting this person thing that basically doesn't have any skin.
Yeah.
And it has like long ass claws, right?
I picture like a necromorph kind of.
Yeah, that's kind of what I would picture too. Looks kind of jacked up. But they realized that it was a person at one point, which is kind of
because
important.
Wells points out, he's like, they may be distorted, but those are human organs.
Yeah, exactly. And let's see. Do they take the device? Right? They take it.
Yeah, they do.
Okay, that's right.
I mean, and then there's like some faffing about on the ship and talking about this thing, like what it could be.
Yeah, and I just love the way that Fuller, like, nobody can understand Fuller when he talks. He's like, everybody knows that kind of person where they are legitimately so much smarter than you that the shit that they're saying makes no sense to anyone but them. And that's how Fuller is, no matter what he's talking about. And I love when he explains things to Sullivan, and Sullivan's like, plain English, please.
Yeah,
like,
English, please.
yeah, because he doesn't get any of it. Do we... I might be jumping to a different point, but...
I mean, I think that's okay. I think this part's over.
We jump back... Do we jump back to Faye? Or do we jump to...
I think this is when they go to Drew Town.
Okay, when Francis... When they go there?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think so.
And they meet up with... That's not when they meet up with Hammer, right? That's way too early.
No, Hammer comes in like at the end.
Yeah,
And she
I was
was
gonna say.
actually there to escort him to the president.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I knew she came up earlier in the book than towards the very end, but yeah.
Yeah, so they go to Drew Town.
Oh, this
which
is when they
one of
meet that
these-
the other heavy, right?
Yeah. Oh, I haven't seen you guys in forever.
Yeah. I love the voice though.
I know, I love that too. So they go to they've been getting rumors about like these pre-built active towns that actives are just signing up to go to, and so they go check it out.
Yeah,
And,
and
yeah,
because they're trying to figure out why, right? Like why anybody would go
yeah.
there.
Why anybody would want to?
Yeah, and so they come up to a house and it has an anvil on the like a levitating anvil on the door, which is the sign of a heavy or a gravity spiker, like Jake. And they talk to this dude who is much more the stereotypical gravity spiker. He's big, but he also is kind of stupid. Like, I mean, that's kind of what he is, right? Like, he's kind of sounds like he's kind of a dummy, but he's really strong, obviously, because of his power. And they basically find out he wanted to go there because they basically promised him that even though like he's poor and he doesn't have a job, like they'll find him all of those things, and all he has to do is sign up to come live in this housing development, essentially. And so he obviously is like, of course I'll do that, because otherwise, you know, because I'm pretty sure he has like a kid or something like that too. So yeah, they really quickly find out that they're basically just going to, instead of forcing everybody to go in there, they're going to make it look so enticing that everybody will come there on their own.
Yeah, it's a real honeypot.
Yeah, that's kind of what the ultimate goal is for them.
And I think now we go back to Faye, and this is when they're taking a train ride.
Yeah, this is where Jacques tells her where she needs to go, right, to find out some more information. Yeah. So we find out that Jacques tells Faye that she's gonna need to go to Dead City, basically, because of the way her spellbound powers work, right? So anytime somebody, active or not, basically dies around her, she absorbs their connection to the power, or essentially grows her own power from it, right?
Right, but then once she uses it, it's gone.
Right, yeah, hers isn't necessarily like everybody, like Jake, where he talks about like using his power and then after a while he feels it come back just naturally to him. His is much more like cardio, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like the more you do it, the more stamina you will have to use to do it in the future. Whereas Faye, just when people die around her, she feels like she can use a ton of power, but once she uses it, it's gone. She doesn't regain hers like everybody else does.
And she has to go to Dead City to meet with somebody who can kind of tell the future.
Yes, yeah. Yeah. And I can't remember his name.
Zachary.
Zachary, thank you. But we don't go there yet, though, do we?
I don't think so. I think we jump back to, this is when they, like, the whole crew that's on the Traveler are, like, going into Shanghai.
Yeah, when they go to Shanghai, yeah. And this is the stuff I was kind of talking about. So they meet with the one kid who's the Grimnoir there, right? Which is extremely dangerous, by the way, to be Grimnoir anywhere near the Imperium, obviously.
Right, yeah, because Shanghai is like an occupied city-state.
Right. So for this kid to be there and be an Imperium, or excuse me, a Grimnoir spy, basically on the inside of the Imperium, is like incredibly dangerous.
Mhm.
And I like that Sullivan's blown away. He's like, this kid's probably only like 20 years old. He's really
not very
young.
old.
Yeah. And they end up going, this is where they go, right? Toru and them go and they talk to the one informant. This is where they get the armor, right? The Nishimura armor.
Yeah, because they, like, the one Grimnoir had found it and they didn't realize what it was, so they were using it as an ashtray.
Yeah, they have like the helmet stuck upside down on the ground.
And, like, pounded into the floor because it's got horns.
Yeah. And this is basically like power armor that's made by the Imperium. That's
It's
essentially
badass.
enhances the wearer.
Gokuten Soku.
Yeah. So they end up. Toru has to, because Toru obviously just wants to kill all these guys for the armor, but they're like, no, that would be a terrible idea. Let's not do that.
Mhm.
So they basically make Toru like do something he would never do and like ask this guy nicely and also insult himself for the armor.
Yeah.
But they're like, Toru, seriously, think about how much benefit it would have for us if you had this. But that dude, right, that they get the armor from, immediately goes and rats them out, doesn't he? To the
Yeah.
Imperium.
Pong.
Yeah,
And this is where we start to get Hayate.
that's right. Yeah, because Hayate immediately, that dude goes and tells the Imperium that the Grimnoir are there and what their kind of plans are. And Hayate shows up, who is the first Shadow Guard, right?
Mhm.
And he's also technically one of Toru's brothers, one of the 1,000 sons
yeah.
of Tokugawa. And yeah, I love that Hayate is like, oh, thank you very much for the information, and then just immediately murders this guy because he's like,
Well-
you're a freaking tattletale,
Well,
basically.
yeah, he's disgusted at, like, the loyalty. He's like,
Yeah.
I thought the Grimnoir were more honorable than this.
Yeah, dude, it's a very interesting dynamic, I feel like, between like the fact that the Imperium, while they don't like the Grimnoir, they still do respect them.
Yeah, they do.
It's, I don't know, I do find it a very unique situation that they're in. And then I can't remember if we jump to a different point here, right? Because this isn't where they end up figuring out that they were found out. Oh, and then
I think
Toru-
we jump back to Faye.
Okay.
But we
Going-
can't. I think we can talk about that Toru part too.
Is this when Toru goes into the secret police? Because the secret police, I don't fully understand the like dynamic that's going on with them, other than they are basically fully on the Imperium side, right? Even though they're not supposed to be, or something like that.
Yeah, they're like dirty cops.
Yeah, that's right. So doesn't he go into like their headquarters and just murders like everyone in there?
Well, first he meets a guy that he used to know that, like, I'm pretty sure he murdered this guy's family, and he was a reporter, and he like tells him, he's like, that's not the real Okubo Tokugawa. He's a fake. Like, I didn't actually fucking abandon the Imperium. They abandoned me.
Right.
And he's like, witness my conviction. He just goes into the police station and murders all those guys.
Yeah. In like brutal freaking Toru
Yeah.
fashion.
I love that he like goes in, and then like next thing the guy on the outside sees is like a dude flying out one of the windows.
Yeah. Smashes like a car with a dude.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, it's brutal. But then, because doesn't Toru then want that guy to basically go and like start spreading that message, right? That the chairman is a fake and things like that. I feel like at the same time that that's kind of going on though, right, is when you have Heinrich and Sullivan and that. God damn it! I'm just drawing a blank on names tonight. That kid that's leading them around. Zhao, yes, yep. Dang, dude, you're killing it on the names.
I don't know how.
I don't know, but you're killing it. I'm drawing a blank. This is this. I feel like it's happening at the same time though, where they're in the tunnels, right, trying to escape.
Yeah, when they meet with Big Ear Do and they like pay him, he's like the biggest crime boss in the city, and they pay him to start a riot when the chairman's gonna be there, so there will be like less presence of everybody, of like, so they'll have to deal with the riot, and so like the chairman won't be as well guarded. But when they do that, one of the serving girls was actually an undercover police officer, and she rats them out.
That's right, yeah. And their escape, right, is through like it's not really sewer tunnels, but like water ducting tunnels under the city, right?
Yeah, I think it's stuff for like flood prevention is what I understood.
Right. And yeah, this part is cool and sucks for them because Lance is with him, right? Because he gets a rat to freaking, he's like, bit her on the ass, and then he drops to the side because he's like, it really hurts getting stepped on or whatever.
Yeah, and then he controls like a swarm of rats.
Yeah, as best he can. Yeah,
and he's like, oh, so much blood.
I love this image too of like Lance, where he has like this kind of glazed look, and someone has to like hold on to him and help him run because he's trying to be in so many different places at one time. I love that. And before Lance can stop them, right, the police, they open the freaking floodgates to these tunnels to basically just fill it with water. They're just gonna freaking drown them in there. And Heinrich's first move is to grab Lance and fade them, obviously, through the ground and out. And so Sullivan is stuck in there with Zhao. And this is when, like, Sullivan basically just starts to get cold. And then it gets colder, and then it gets colder, and he's just like, what is happening? Well, Zhao is like an incredibly powerful icebox, and I love that he just freezes like a plug in the tunnel of this onrush of water in front of him.
Well, he freezes it, and then Jake can use his gravity powers too to stop it from sliding.
Yeah, and then Heinrich shows back up and takes Zhao because Zhao passes out from how much power he uses.
Too much power.
Yeah. And then, Jake has to, like, anchor himself to the ground, and I love that this, like, plug of ice just runs into him, and he's just, like, anchored there holding himself.
He's just like he's a fucking wall.
Yeah, and then it starts to shatter around him, and all these little spouts of water come out, and then Heinrich obviously comes back and grabs him and fades him out.
Yeah, that's a very cool scene.
It is a very cool scene, though. I do like it.
I think we gotta jump back to Faye.
I think so too, when she actually gets to Dead City, right?
Yeah, and she doesn't really know where Zachary is, so she's just kind of like teleporting all over the place.
Which is very difficult for her in Dead City because her head map can show like buildings and living things very easily, but zombies, which is what Dead City is full of, not so much. So she can see like a room clear as day, but she has no idea what's in those rooms at all.
Yeah.
So she's constantly just like having to bounce around a lot because obviously there's zombies everywhere. That's why it's called Dead City.
I like that she meets the guy who thinks like the next day is going to be a parade. So he's in like his military fatigues, but he is like, no, I guess it's more like his parade stuff. And he's just like, it's all like gleaming because he's just been cleaning it for years.
Yeah, that's all he does, right?
Yeah.
So Faye ends up finding Zachary, and this room that Zachary in, right, is just full of drawings, right?
Yeah.
And Faye realizes that some of the drawings are things that did happen, like Heinrich having the pickaxe on the Demon King's back or whatever. Like, there are things depicted that definitely did come true.
And she can tell the paper's like old. It's not like stuff that's just been drawn. It's stuff that's like ancient.
Yeah. And I can't remember now. Does he tell her or does he give her a drawing that he's done?
He gives her a bunch of drawings, but he also does tell her about a lot of stuff.
Basically, though, the future that he sees is that Faye, as the Spellbound, and this is why we find out later why Jacques is so worried and the other Grimnoir elders are worried, is because basically the Spellbound will always hunger for more power. And will figure out very quickly that if they just kill people on their own, they gain more and more power. So that's the future too that Zachary sees for her.
But he also tells her that like there's a chance that she is like the secret to everything and like saving them from the enemy.
Yeah, and he also is pretty clear that his predictions are not always correct. There are things that he predicts that do not come true. And does he tell her about the Black Monk?
Yeah, he does.
That's right.
In like every future, she has to go kill him.
Yeah, and we'll talk about him shortly when she goes to meet him. She ends up though going back, and again I'm probably skipping around a little bit, but she goes and talks to Jacques again, right? She's kind of pissed off at Jacques because she also sees in Zachary's room, right, that Jacques was planning on killing her, right? Like poisoning her.
Yeah, and we've gotten a little bits here and there of like just Jacques thinking in his head about like, oh, like I'm gonna let her go in there and then she's gonna come out and I'm gonna poison her because she's so trusting.
Yeah. But Jacques explains to her, right, because Sivaram, the guy who created the Spellbound curse, basically that is like what he was on his way to doing. He would have pretty much destroyed the world himself because all he wanted to do is kill people to absorb their power. That's like all he cared about doing. So basically Jacques like, you gotta understand why, you know, our failsafe was to just kill you because we couldn't risk you doing the same thing.
Yeah, so Faye's pretty pissed.
Yeah, and Faye is also far more powerful than Sivaram ever was.
Yeah,
which is crazy.
She is. Well, I think that's because she's also. Oh, I don't want to spoil it, I guess.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about, and yes, I think you're right because Sivaram was a traveler, which we find out later is kind of why Faye is the way she is also. Let's see, what happens next? I'm conflating.
Is this where we jump to Lance's perspective?
When they get attacked?
Yeah.
It's gotta be, yeah.
Well, I love the setup of this scene where he's just like kind of talking to one of the other guys about one of the books that he wrote. And they're like, you know, talking back and forth. And then like the chapter ends and it's like, and then a ninja appeared and stabbed Lance in the chest.
Yeah, dude, yeah. And it kicks off this freaking crazy set of events. So basically the hideout that they're in, right, in Shanghai, gets raided by Shadow Guard. Right?
Yeah.
So, and the Shadow Guard obviously are mostly travelers and fades is kind of what they use as Shadow Guard only. So they're just basically appearing out of nowhere with like swords and just hacking people up. The Grimnoir actually not faring very well in this one.
And I love too that Toru, he has like powered up his power armor at this point, and he's like going through the diagnostics and he's like, wait, I see way more magic than I'm supposed to.
Right.
And he just reaches up through the ceiling and grabs a Shadow Guard by the foot and pulls him down.
Yeah, and it's funny too because obviously when he's wearing the armor, this other Shadow Guard just sees an Imperium set of armor. And he's like, oh, I didn't know we were going to have any Nishimura armor there. And Toru just like slams him and kills him because the dude hesitates obviously too long because he thinks that the Nishimura armor is on their side. So yeah, I do like that. But this is where, so Lance also, he got stabbed and then he ends up like killing a few ninjas, and then one of them like comes at him with a sword, and Lance ends up. Oh, that's right. The guy is coming at him. He's a Fade, and Lance has a double barrel shotgun, right? And the Fade is coming at him while he's trying to reload this thing, and it's crazy. He like pulls up the shotgun, fires it as the ninja like swings, and Lance knew, he's like, he's got to make a choice. He can either fade and he won't hit me, so he'll miss the bullet, or he has to hit me with it. So he pulls the trigger and he just blasts like this dude into pieces, and he's like, ah. He's like, ha, I won that one. And then he realizes
won that one. Yeah.
His freaking hand is gone. He
Yeah,
cut his
it's like
fucking
stuck
hand
to
off.
the shotgun.
Yeah, dude. Oh my god. So this scene, this time around, listening to it was kind of rough for me. It's like,
Really?
yeah, dude. Like, this is probably the most emotional scene I feel like in all 3 books to me.
It is, but I love the way that Lance goes out. Like he's just getting constantly more and more fucked up, but he's still killing all these guys.
Yeah.
And
He
then, like
even
it comes
says
down to it, where go ahead.
Well, I just love that too. That towards the end, yeah, he's like, I'm Lance fucking Talon.
Yeah.
Like, he's but Lance is like fighting a losing battle here. Like he's been shot like 7 or 8 times. His hand's been cut off. And then he gets like surrounded, right? And he has a moment of realization where he's like, it's been said that a beastie like him, someone who controls animals, has controlled a human before, but he has never even really tried to do that because he knows it would take so much power that it would probably kill him. So at this point, he's like, what do I have to lose? So he actually mind controls one of these other Imperium, and I love that he like jumps into this other guy's mind, and then he starts laughing. So the other ones all look at him as he just starts like hacking him or he starts shooting him because he has the automatic. He has like the freaking automatic rifle with that guy. He just starts shooting the shit out of all these other guys while he's in control of this dude. It's freaking awesome.
I know, and then he pulls that guy's sword and cuts his own guts out.
Yeah, he literally makes the guy commit suicide.
Yeah, dude.
Yeah. But then he jumps back into his own body and he dies. So
yeah, it's pretty sad.
Yeah, it's
I really
bummer.
like Lance.
Yeah, Lance is a great character. So that was that was one of the hardest like losses in the whole series.
Yeah. And then I believe we jump back over to Toru, and he meets with Hayate, and Hayate like knows it's Toru in there, and he's like, I'd like to have a one-on-one duel with you, but there's no way I could persuade you to get out of that armor, is there? And he's like, no, there isn't. And he's like, good thing I came prepared, and he basically gets like a bazooka and just shoots him with it.
Yeah. I also like that at one point, I think it might be a little bit later on, but Hayate, so because he's the leader of the Shadow Guard, I'm pretty sure he's talking to the new leader of the Iron Guard. And at one point, that dude's all pissed off and essentially wants to like fight with Hayate or something. And I love that Hayate's like something about, plus I would never do it fairly, and I would have him poisoned beforehand.
Yeah, I would have him poisoned beforehand anyway. Yeah, like,
yeah.
It's so funny.
I love that he's just completely open about the fact that he doesn't give a shit. He'll just do what he has to do to win.
Yeah. And then I think we jump over to Sullivan, right? Because he was on his way back to the hideout, and they get stopped by some like sweet Japanese patrol boats.
Yeah. Is this when they like when Sullivan jacks him up, right? Where he like picks the patrol boat up with his power and then he slams it back onto the water. Yeah.
And they're interrogating the police guy. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, because they also had like a tarp over their boat, right? And he throws it off, and he also has the gun, the mounted gun, right?
Yeah.
He just starts ripping into the patrol boats. That's right.
But they're not interviewing, they're like freaking interrogating the police chief, and Zhao hears the guy's name, and he's like, oh, you're Matsuoka? Like, you were the one that tortured and killed my parents. And he like freezes him solid.
Oh yeah.
I love the fact that you like his eyeballs crack because they get frozen so solid. But yeah, but they get information out of him that like 3 out of the 4 safe houses had been hit.
Right.
And then I believe like one person comes swimming. Is it Heinrich?
I can't remember, to be honest.
Well, yeah. Anyway, like everything is so fucked. Like
Yeah.
but they didn't have a lot of people to pull this plan off before, but now they're like truly fucked.
Yeah, because of all, they're like, they took horrible losses when the Imperium figured out where they were at in Shanghai, and obviously, like you said, killed a bunch of Grimnoir. Do we jump back over to Faye meeting with the Black Monk?
Yeah, freaking Rasputin.
Yeah, this part to me, slightly disappointing too, to be honest. So, the Black Monk, when she meets with him, basically explains that if Kubo Tokugawa was the first one to connect to the power, he was the second.
Mm-hmm.
So, theoretically, the second most powerful being alive. Theoretically. So, Faye realizes, number one, that this guy is a horrible piece of shit because he's in a church, but he's surrounded by what she thought were animal corpses at first, right? But then realizes they're human corpses.
That, and he admits to he's working for the fucking Pathfinder.
Yeah, because it basically promised him, that he would be even more powerful once the Pathfinder takes over.
Mm-hmm.
So Faye realizes that this dude has a ton of magic, so she needs to kill him to absorb it. So she proceeds to fight with him, and this is the only reason I say it's kind of disappointing, is I feel like he kind of goes down like a bitch. Like, for being the second most powerful being, I just feel like he didn't put up enough of a fight.
I mean, the chairman doesn't really put up a lot of a fight when she kills him either.
He doesn't, and I thought that was kind of disappointing too. But
I like his magic though, that he's like essentially like deconstructing stuff, like from like the atom basis.
Yeah,
he's like unmaking things.
Right.
I think that's cool.
I hate to make this comparison, but he was like, it was before Thanos. He basically had like the snap before Thanos did.
Okay, I thought you were gonna bring up Full Metal Alchemist, but okay.
That's a good way to look at it too. That's a better
always what
way,
I think
actually.
about it, like
That's
Scar, how he's only doing like 2 parts of transmutation.
Yeah, where he just does the breaking down. He does not do the reconstruction part. It's a much better way to look at it. Why would I say the name like Thanos? That's so
I don't know, man. I don't know either.
I don't know. I'll just see myself out now. No, I'll just... I'm gonna hang it up. That name should have never touched my lips in a non-ironic way.
But yeah, Faye totally punks him, kills him.
Yeah, gets all his magic. So now she's like swimming in magic. Also, up to this point, I failed to mention that everybody still thinks Faye is dead as far as the Grimnoir
except for
goes.
Francis.
Right. But everybody else, like Sullivan, everybody else assumes Faye is dead. What happened next? I feel like
I think they're on the Traveler, and they're explaining like their plan, that they're basically just gonna drop Jake Sullivan into the middle of them, and they have this like exposer thing that Buckminster Fuller made, but it has to be targeted correctly, so they have to fly up really, really high to use it.
Right.
And Sullivan kind of comes to the realization that he has to put that spell that Crow had on himself in order to like make this even attemptable.
Yeah, and isn't it kind of like a spellbound spell, right?
Kind of, I think.
Like it's an amplifier spell, basically, right?
Yeah, I mean, it made Crow so powerful he could like wear his demons like a suit.
Right, instead of just summoning them, yeah. And
I think we cut over to Toru too, don't we? And he's like in prison.
Yes, I forgot. Yeah, I forgot that Toru gets... Because, yeah, after Hayate shot him, then they capture him while he's in the suit. And they decide, because he talks to the fake chairman and challenges him, right? Or something?
Well, yeah, he's going to make like a public example of him.
yeah, the chairman is going to basically fight Toru in front of everybody, just as a public demonstration of what they would do to this level of traitor, basically. And because Toru, they were like, it'll look really good because Toru has all these commendations. He's widely regarded as one of the best warriors of all time. You know, he probably would have been first Iron Guard if he wasn't a traitor and all these things. So.
And they're gonna let him wear the Nishimura armor.
Right, which will amplify him insanely. But before that's gonna happen, the freaking fake chairman, what does he do? Does it come out of his mouth?
No, I maybe it does come out of his mouth, but I like to imagine it's in like a cup already. Maybe it comes out of his mouth. I don't know.
Yeah, I like to imagine him like puking it up, like.
I imagine like, you know, like that cup he drinks out of in Prometheus in the beginning when it like dissolves him in.
Yeah,
his
okay.
base components. That's what I picture as like a moving, writhing liquid.
Okay. Yeah, and then he forces this into Toru's face, and then we kind of.
And it like climbs up his nose.
Yeah, because he holds his mouth shut, and then he realizes it forces its way into his nose
and like by his eyes,
his ears. Yeah.
Ugh.
It's crazy. It's like the goo from Fern Gully. Like...
Oh, it is like the goo from Fern Gully. What a deep pull.
Right. And then we go back to the Traveler.
Yeah.
When does Faye get back?
I believe right now. I think she just travels onto the Traveler, doesn't she?
Is that what she does? I feel like that's what happens too. Like it's a very just kind of, she just shows back up. And Sullivan is also decked out in some armor, right? That Fuller designed
yeah, his
for him.
Spiker armor.
Yeah.
No, Browning designed it.
Or yeah, you're right. Browning did.
Because Buckminster Fuller won't make Killing Rein.
That's only Living Rein. I like to imagine too Jake's armor like this big like hulking but very not sleek armor.
Mm-hmm.
Like almost just looks like a welding hood for a face mask. Like,
yeah, he's like made of like pots and pans and shit.
Yeah, dude. But obviously, like it complements him very well.
Mm-hmm.
It makes him very powerful. It also has spells and stuff carved into it to help him as well.
And at this point too, Faye sits down with Lady Origami and she like folds something for her.
Oh yeah.
And then she gets like in her head she figures out how to tap into other powers by like folding her personal connection.
Yeah.
So she could basically use anything now.
Right. We should also mention before the assault that Jake and Lady Origami fuck. And I only...
Oh my god, I didn't think you were gonna put it in such blatant terms.
Well, I only say that because that's what leads up to the Tokyo Raider book, so...
That's true, you're right.
I feel like it's important information.
You're right.
And for anybody who's curious, it's not like a freaking sexy book type thing. No, she literally just like drops her robe and he talks about how she has nothing on, and then they like climb into bed, and then that's the end of the scene. So, and then. Sorry, I just imagine the part off Miss March, and he comes out and he's like, he tired.
He tired.
He tired. How was it, man? It was good. It was good. I'm gonna go to bed now.
Yeah, his face.
Sorry, that's like one of the best scenes in a movie of all time when she flies out the window.
I know, just because we're talking about that movie. I love the part where he's like, dude, look, the fireman. And then they like start sprinting towards him. I was like, dude, the fireman.
Yeah, the fireman. The dude throws his axe and
he like tomahawks it. It's awesome.
For anybody who hasn't watched Miss March, please go watch Miss March.
R.I.P. Trevor.
Yeah. Oh yeah, dude. Oh man, that makes me sad.
Whoa. Sorry.
I know. It's just a reality.
I didn't kill him.
I know. Okay, back on track. Okay, so now the plan is that Jake is going to dive down into the middle of this ceremony, and he explains to everyone what he's gonna do, right?
Yeah, that he's basically going to announce himself as the Pathfinder.
As the Pathfinder, yeah.
Yeah.
And what he's gonna do is basically tell all of the Imperium that are present that he is the Pathfinder, and that he has infiltrated their schools, and he is the reason that there are problems in their schools and all these things.
Mm-hmm.
And even though the chairman obviously is going to say that that's a lie, they're hoping they can plant the seeds of doubt in some of them. And it also will look bad on the chairman if he says it's a lie.
Yeah.
Because they'll be like, wait, if they're saying this is the real Pathfinder, why would you tell us that's a lie? So it will also
they're also going to sweep the city with this thing that will show the human eye if there is like Pathfinder inside of somebody.
Right.
Like if they're like masquerading into somebody else.
Yeah, so like the skinless guy we were talking about earlier, that kind of thing. So I believe we jump back to Toru.
Yeah.
Toru is now basically, and actually I think it's from Hayate's perspective, because
Hayate jumps back and talks to him.
Yeah, even though he's not supposed to.
Yeah, because he's not supposed to. But Toru is like, there's monsters in my head, and like I don't know what they've done to me. And like immediately Hayate is like, what the fuck? Like this is not the Toru I remember.
Yeah, exactly. So right away Hayate is already kind of questioning what's going on to begin with. But then they basically suit Toru up, right, and they send him out to fight the chairman.
Yeah, and Toru's like, he can't control his body at all.
Yeah,
it's just like moving of its own accord.
Yeah, it's being controlled for him, and it's working out perfectly because as he's fighting the chairman is making all of these kind of very elaborate attacks and all these things, and Toru, he says it too, he's like, I see several sloppy openings and I can't do anything about it, because obviously Toru against the real chairman probably wouldn't have stood a chance, but against this imposter chairman, I have a feeling he would have stood a chance.
Oh, I think he would have obliterated him.
Yeah. So while their fight is going on, all of a sudden some people start like looking up because oh, that's right, before that happens though, Faye travels to one of the other Imperium ships because it's trying to shoot the Traveler down.
Yeah, and proceeds to murder everybody there.
She
in like
literally
54 seconds.
Yeah, murders pretty much everyone on board, and then also manages to set the whole ship on fire and basically essentially sink it. You know, the equivalent of sinking a ship on sea. Yeah, and she absorbs the power of like another 1,000 people, just like that. And then Sullivan has jumped from the Traveler, right? And he is, I love this, I get very like Dragon Ball Z, like him flying down, and every time he increases his gravity he gets like that little, like when they fly through the air faster and the like little explosions come off.
Oh yeah, when it's like, yeah, behind him.
Yeah. Yeah, and then as he's getting close, and like close enough to where they can see him, is when he makes his announcement, right? That he is the Pathfinder, he's infiltrated the schools, he's infiltrated the Imperium, and there's nothing they can do about it, essentially. And their plan works perfectly because the fake chairman is like, that's a lie, that's not true. So immediately they're like, what do you mean that's a lie? That's what that's what you've been training us to fight. Why would you tell us that's a lie?
Well, and at this same moment, the like beam sweeps across the crowd, and a bunch of the Iron Guards see a bunch of these skinwalkers like amongst them, and so they all turn on each other.
Right. They God damn it. And then so Sullivan lands, and he's got like his BAR, and he just starts annihilating people also, like kind of indiscriminately, because he's the only like Grimnoir there. Faye also comes down and starts fighting the false chairman, right?
Yeah, and at some point too, Toru like prays to his dad.
Yeah.
And he like purges
has a real like ex machina moment.
Yeah.
Yeah, because at one point that is what Okubo told him, right, that if you ever are in dire need, call upon me and I will help you. And this is the Toru uses his trump card, and basically that's what alleviates the Pathfinder thing that was taking over Toru's body, essentially. And that's what allows Toru to get back into the fight. And very cool. Like, you got Toru in his very Japanese style samurai armor, back to back with Sullivan in his very, I just picture freaking, yeah, just like this welding hood freaking beast of a dude just with his BAR just laying people out. Yeah, just fighting kind of back to back. It's pretty badass.
And Faye does show up, and she fights the fake chairman for a while, and she just like is punking him and like using the counter magic to everything he's doing.
Yeah, and because obviously now she needs to stop the Pathfinder. Like, that's her goal. Is as the Spellbound, she knows she is the only one who can become powerful enough to stop the Pathfinder. So, yeah, she's kind of punking him and stuff, and they get to a point where she's winning. Like, he cannot beat her. But this Pathfinder basically reveals to her that it doesn't matter, because it's already all over the world. Like, and it's essentially like a hive mind style thing, kind of like with what was going on with Toru. So no matter what she does, doesn't matter. It's not going to stop the outcome. Toru ends up freaking smashing the false chairman, right? And then Sullivan ends up punching the Pathfinder into the ground and like popping it. I love that.
Then the freaking chairman goes like supernova and explodes.
Yeah, that was like his one final thing, is that he
got my die move.
Yeah, dude, he had martyrdom set to all three perks. So they quickly realize though, right? So everybody's all fucked up now. Everybody's jacked, like, other than Faye. Faye's the only one who's like fine still.
But she doesn't even stay till the end. She teleports away immediately and starts to go to these other places that are close to like opening the door to let the thing in.
Because basically right before this Pathfinder dies, it had already planted the seeds of itself all over the world. And it essentially tells those parts of it, just go. Just start killing everyone. You know, you gotta send the signal, basically. So yeah, Faye starts jumping around the world, essentially, to try to stop this thing. And she ends up, who does she travels up to someone in the Grimnoir. She's just like covered in blood and gore. And she
goes to like the Elders Council.
But they had seen the map, right, of where, what the fuck was it? I thought she sees the device though, right? That Buckminster Fuller had been working on, because doesn't it start like lighting up red at this point when all of the people start dying, or the red goes out?
I don't remember that part.
Either way, I remember she goes and she talks to one guy, and she basically turns herself into a reader, right? And she rips this thing out of his memory. She's like, remember this map really clearly, and she rips it from his
she
memory.
goes to Francis to get the Nixie power so she can make the black hole thing.
Is that
That's
what
she does.
Oh,
but she also
shit. Yeah.
She also goes to like the Elders Council and like implants like all the places that she knows about where the door might open into the guy's head.
That's what it was. Yeah, that's what it was. And then tells him to draw it, right?
Yeah.
She puts it into his head and tells him to draw it so everybody else can, and then spread the word, right? So they can try to stop this all at the same time. They end up not being fast enough.
Yeah, because she forgot about Rockville.
Yeah.
And so Rockville was enough to open the door.
Yeah. And so basically what happens is this rip in space essentially shows up, and the predator part of the predator and prey, right, of the power and the enemy comes through. it starts coming through, and I basically picture like a Cthulhu type situation, just like tentacles coming out and like widening this gap to try to pull itself through. But it's Cthulhu is wrong because these things are more like geometrical shapes, right?
Yeah, for some reason I picture a big triangle with like a mouth on it.
Okay. Yeah.
I don't know why, I just do.
It's like all it is.
Yeah.
Whereas the power is all these really intricate, delicate, geometrical shapes.
Yeah, this one's just a big triangle with a mouth.
It's just like, meh.
Yeah, exactly, dude.
So, Faye realizes the only thing she can do is basically cast the same spell that they used on the King of Demons, right?
Yeah, the like black hole thing.
Yeah. So what she's going to do is she's going to use this spell and open it right in front of the door that the enemy is opening. So it essentially will feel like it's coming through into our world, but it will then go through this portal and hopefully be trapped in that place forever. And she uses all of this newfound power she has to make this black hole as big as possible. She almost ends up killing herself. She almost ends up killing the whole world.
Yeah.
But she succeeds, and the giant triangle monster goes straight into it.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah.
Yeah.
Ski gas. And, yeah. So Faye saves the goddamn universe of, well, she saves this world because, you know, this cycle, we find that out too, you know, in some of the subtext, that the cycle has been repeated hundreds of thousands of times. And
yeah, I don't know if this is like the final nail in the coffin for the enemy, like it can never come back.
Right.
I don't know.
I feel like that's, if there's one opening left in the book, that could be it.
Yeah.
Like, if the enemy is as powerful as we've been led to believe, you know, why couldn't it escape this other dimension they put it in? Yeah, so we get the epilogue, right?
Yeah, we find out that Faye is no longer a traveler. The spellbound curse had been like taken away from her.
Yeah.
because
Oh
she
shit!
had-
We forgot
she
to
had
mention
Well, go ahead.
Faye's. We forgot to mention Faye, the thing we were talking about and
Oh,
dancing
yeah.
around the whole time. Yeah, because it's Fuller, right? Buckminster Fuller.
Yeah, because he can actually see magic.
Yeah, so he says something to Sullivan, and he's like, yeah, she is the most amazing cog I've ever seen. And Sullivan's like, cog? What? Faye is a traveler. And he's like, oh yeah, she definitely, the way he talks, she definitely has some sort of connection to the traveler power. But she's most definitely a cog. And he's like, what are you talking about? Or he says she was born a cog.
Yeah.
So that is why like Faye can do these calculations and stuff insanely fast, and why she has her head map is from her cog abilities.
Mm-hmm.
Her traveler abilities only showed up when Sivaram was killed and the spellbound curse attached itself to her.
Right, because it like brought along the traveler part. At least that's
Right.
how I think of it.
Yeah, exactly. So, but yeah, so now Faye is no longer a traveler because she met with the power, right?
Yeah.
When she was opening the portal, she basically had a choice, right?
Mm-hmm.
And she decided that she would give up everything that she had in order to save humanity, right? So yeah, she's no longer a traveler. Toru goes and talks to Sullivan, right?
Yeah, which I like this bit at the end.
Yeah. Toru goes and finds Sullivan, who has basically been in hiding essentially since the incident with the Pathfinder. And this is where we find out, right, that he has a kid.
Yeah.
With
I
Lady
get the feeling
Origami.
this is like a year or two later, right?
Yeah. It's gotta be. And Toru tracks him down. And Toru basically is like, we never settled our question of which of us would be the better, fighter.
Mm-hmm.
And Sullivan's like, are you serious? Like, you seriously want to do this right here and right now? But Toru kind of relents to him, right? And basically says that he thinks that Sullivan would be the better fighter, right?
Yeah, and I think a lot of that is because Toru had left behind like that sword that he broke in the second book to like reform his honor, and Sullivan sent it to him afterwards. He like made sure that he got it.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Basically, Toru concedes that Sullivan, not necessarily in strength, kind of like we were talking about before, but in a lot of ways, is just like the better person, essentially, is what Toru is trying to say. I get the impression, at least, is that, yeah, Toru, not necessarily, they don't need to necessarily fight to determine which of them is the better person, essentially.
Exactly.
And that's obviously a huge deal for Toru to say something like that, because Toru is all about being honor bound and all of these things. So it is actually a very heavy kind of moment in the book.
Yeah, and it's a nice kind of cap off, I think, to the trilogy.
Yeah, I agree. And with that, right, it's kind of a nice little, like, I feel like it's why I'm so upset that they then roll right into the freaking
The Tokyo Raider.
The Tokyo Raider thing. Yeah, because it honestly, it kind of bums me out, because you roll right into this Tokyo Raider thing, and right away it's like the main character of that is Sullivan and Lady Origami's kid, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But I just feel like it falls into so many of those kind of like things. Like, oh, Francis is the president and Faye is the first lady and Toru is the leader of the Imperium now, and I was just like, really? Did we have to like establish all of those things? Then you, by the way, you hear all of those things in that little snippet. So
Yeah.
it's not even like spoilers for that. Like, you get all of those in the preview of the 1 hour long book. So yeah, I don't know. It's not really part of Warbound, obviously, but it's a disappointment that it's tacked on to the end of Warbound.
Yeah, which I mean, this probably contributes to the length of this one being the longest, right?
Yeah, that's true. It could be. Yeah, they might all clock in right about the exact same time if you didn't
I was
have
thinking
that.
about that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty much it, isn't it, for Warbound?
Yeah, I think we got it all in there.
Yeah.
It's everything I wanted to say.
Yeah, for sure. Again, super good book, super good trilogy. You know, we in these reviews, like, we're probably not doing this justice, especially me, can't even remember a single goddamn name. But we definitely feel strongly about this one. The series is pretty near and dear to us for a couple of reasons. I feel like I feel like we did Hard Magic pretty early on in our
I think so.
thing. But another huge reason I'm kind of connected to these books is the fact that we did have Bronson Pinchot on the show and we were able to talk to him. So,
Yeah, that was so fun.
yeah, absolutely. And that, I just feel like that makes these stories even more kind of near and dear for me. So yeah, you got anything else on this one?
No, just thank you all for listening. I appreciate every single one of you. It means the world to me. You guys take the time out of your day to listen to me, my brother, just talk shit.
Yeah, absolutely. It's incredible that anyone listens to it. And yeah, tell your friends about this ridiculous show that you've heard on here. We have a couple of new things that'll be coming out after this is released. So look forward to that. It's getting close to Christmas time, so a couple of those things will be Christmas related. If you're listening to this way in the future, you'll be like, what are you talking about? It's June? Like, no.
Yeah.
But when this is released, yeah, if you're listening to this on the day and date that it's released, just be aware that Christmas is coming up, and we got a couple specials that we put out for that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you got anything else?
No, I think I'm good.
Yeah, again, thank you all for listening. If you feel like contacting us for any reason, please feel free to reach out. kotpl.pod@gmail.com is the easiest way to get a hold of us. And with that, we will catch you guys in the next one.